On the 15th of April, 1989, 97 people went to watch an FA Cup semi-final in Sheffield and did not come home. They were crushed to death, standing up, in a fenced enclosure at the Leppings Lane end of Hillsborough Stadium, in front of a live television audience, in the opening minutes of a football match. What followed was, by the eventual findings of a coroner's jury and 2 major inquiries, not simply a disaster but a decades-long effort to attribute the deaths to the people who died. The families of the victims spent 27 years fighting to overturn that account. This is a story about how 97 people were killed by a set of decisions that had almost nothing to do with them, and about how much longer it took to establish the truth than it took to construct the falsehood. To understand how it happened, you have to understand what English football grounds had become. Through the 1970s and 80s, hooliganism was a serious and genuine problem, and the response, driven by clubs, police and government, was to treat supporters as a population to be contained. Standing terraces were divided into pens by lateral fences, and high fences topped with spikes were erected between the terrace and the pitch to stop pitch invasions. The effect was that a spectator entering a pen could not easily leave it, could not get onto the pitch, and in a crush had nowhere to go. Grounds were also old, with capacities that in many cases had never been properly recalculated. Hillsborough's Leppings Lane end had a safety certificate that was years out of date and had not been amended after significant alterations to the terracing, and the individual pen capacities were, as later analysis showed, considerably overstated. The match was Liverpool against Nottingham Forest, a neutral venue semi-final. Liverpool supporters were allocated the Leppings Lane end, which had far fewer turnstiles than the volume of people needed to pass through them, creating a bottleneck outside the ground as kick-off approached. A dangerous crush developed in the street. To relieve it, the police match commander ordered a large exit gate, Gate C, to be opened. Around 2,000 people came through it in a short period. The problem was what lay directly ahead of that gate. A tunnel, sloping downwards, leading straight into the central pens, which were already at or beyond capacity, while the side pens had space. Nobody closed the tunnel or directed the incoming supporters sideways. The crowd went where the geometry sent them, downhill into pens 3 and 4, and the people already at the front were pressed against a fence they could not climb. The match kicked off. Within about 6 minutes it was clear to some people in the stands that something was badly wrong, though the nature of the emergency was not immediately understood by those in charge. In a crush of this kind, death comes from compressive asphyxia. The chest is compressed so tightly that the person cannot expand it to breathe, and they lose consciousness and die while remaining upright, held in place by the bodies around them. Supporters tried to climb the fences and were, in some cases, pushed back by police who initially interpreted what they were seeing as a pitch invasion. Others were pulled up into the stand above by fans reaching down. Fans tore down advertising hoardings and used them as stretchers to carry the injured across the pitch. Of the dozens of ambulances that arrived, only a very small number reached the pitch itself. The account that reached the public began forming within hours, and it was not accurate. Briefings attributed to police sources described drunk, ticketless Liverpool supporters forcing their way in and causing the crush, and alleged that fans had robbed the dead and obstructed the emergency services. For days later, a national newspaper published those claims under a one-word front-page headline presenting them as the truth. The effect on the city of Liverpool was profound and lasting, and the boycott of that newspaper across the region continues to this day. Subsequent investigation established that the allegations were false. The Hillsborough Independent Panel, reporting in 2012 after examining hundreds of thousands of documents, found that a substantial number of police statements had been reviewed and amended, with material unfavorable to the police removed, and that there had been a concerted effort to deflect blame onto the supporters. The original inquests compounded everything. The coroner imposed a cut-off, ruling that evidence relating to events after 3:15 in the afternoon would not be considered, on the reasoning that all the victims had by then sustained injuries that were inevitably fatal. That single decision removed the entire emergency response from scrutiny, meaning the question of whether anyone could have been saved by a better organized rescue was never examined. Blood alcohol levels were taken from the dead, including from children, which had no evidential purpose except to support the drunkenness narrative. In 1991, the inquests returned verdicts of accidental death. For the families, this was the central injustice, because an accidental death verdict states, in law, that nobody was responsible. They campaigned against it for the next 2 decades, through private prosecutions, judicial scrutinies, and repeated refusals, without institutional support and largely without national sympathy. The breakthrough came slowly and then decisively. The Hillsborough Independent Panel published in 2012, and its findings were sufficiently serious that the High Court quashed the original inquest verdicts and ordered fresh inquests. Those new inquests ran for over 2 years, the longest in English legal history, and in April 2016 the jury returned its determinations. It found that the supporters were unlawfully killed. It found that the match commander's actions amounted to gross negligence manslaughter. It identified failures in stadium design and safety certification, in the planning for the match, and in the emergency response. And crucially, in answer to a specific question, the jury found that the behavior of the supporters did not contribute to the dangerous situation. 27 years after the deaths, the account that had been circulated within hours of them was formally and comprehensively rejected. The practical consequences reshaped football everywhere. The inquiry led by Lord Justice Taylor reported in 1990, and its central recommendation was the removal of standing terraces at the top divisions in favour of all-seater stadiums, along with the removal of the perimeter fences that had made the pens inescapable. English grounds were rebuilt or replaced across the following decade, and the modern all-seater stadium, and much of the commercial transformation that came with it, traces directly to that report. Safety certification, capacity calculation, and stewarding were all overhauled. The wider effect on how crowd disasters are investigated has been significant too, and Hillsborough is now a standard case study in crowd dynamics, in emergency planning, and in the specific danger of treating a crush as a disciplinary problem rather than a medical emergency. Prosecutions brought decades later, however, largely failed to secure convictions. What makes Hillsborough different from other stadium disasters is not the death toll, terrible as it is. It is the length and deliberateness of what came afterwards. The crush itself took minutes and was caused by a chain of decisions about fences, capacities, turnstiles, and one opened gate, none of which any supporter had any part in. Establishing that took 27 years, 2 full-scale inquiries, a quashing of the original verdicts by the High Court, and the longest inquests in English legal history, driven the entire time by families who had also just lost children, parents, and siblings, and who were told for decades that their own people had caused it. The final jury answer to the question of supporter behavior was a single word: no. 97 people are counted among the dead, the last of them having died in 2021 from injuries sustained that afternoon.